Hi guys, this is Liz Canada from Sleek Lens. Today I have a tutorial on the HDR out of the shadows workflow, and I'm going to be showing you guys how to use this workflow to enhance the details and light of your architecture photography. This workflow is really great. It's all about high dynamic range, and you can use it with landscape or architecture photography, but in this case I'm going to be showing you how to use it for your architecture photography. So I've got a photo pulled up and I'm going to start down in my HDR presets. So this workflow comes with quite a few different HDR presets, all meant to enhance the details in your photograph so you get a more crisp, clean, and clear photograph. So for this one I'm going to be starting with the HDR standard. So as you can see right away, the one preset has already brightened the shadows, brought a lot of color and light back into the photograph. Now I'm going to be going to my exposure presets, and I'm going to stack on top of here an exposure preset. I'm going to use the brighten to add more light, but it's slightly too much light, so what I'm going to do is go into my basic tab and just turn the exposure down a little bit and adjust it. Alright, I'm going to use a color correct preset, and I'm going to be reducing the greens in here. Now I'm going to move to my brushes that come with this workflow, and I'm going to be using a brighten shadows brush to start. A lot of times what you'll find on your architecture in your photograph is that a lot of the detail gets washed out and falls kind of in the shadows. So using this brighten shadows brush is going to help bring back the light here so that you can see the details in the structures. Right, so once I've gone ahead and done that, I'm going to hit new. I'm going to my out of the shadows brushes, and I'm going to be using the subtle HDR clarity. And again, I'm using that on the structure as well to add clarity and sharpness to the details here. And I am going to use it kind of along here as well, where we have these people standing and just some general detail, and it's going to just add a little bit of clarity to it. So that's all I'm going to do with the brushes. I'm going to close this out, and I'm going to go to my basics tab, and I'm going to adjust my presets a bit by turning up my contrast, and I'm going to be turning my highlights down a little bit. Alright, so here's the before and after. So as you can see, it's made a huge improvement. We've gotten all of the color and light and detail back in the structure here, and overall we've just kind of improved the photograph. So here's the before. So moving on to a second photograph, I'm going to start with my HDR presets again. And for this one, I'm going to be using the very subtle HDR. So when it comes to the high dynamic range or the HDR, you can kind of overdo it and it'll make your images look unrealistic. So for this one, the reason I chose the very subtle HDR is because that there are a lot of already crisp details in the structure here. And if I were to add a whole lot and really up the dynamic range, it would probably look unrealistic. So that's why I use the subtle one for this. So now I'm moving into my brushes here, and I'm going to be using the General Lift Shadows brush. And I'm just using that to kind of brighten up these darkened areas here. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and hit new. I'm going to again use the subtle HDR clarity, and I'm just using that on the structure here, Scotland Monument, and on the steps as well, and on this building back here, just to bring more clarity and detail to the structures. Right, I'm going to go back into my presets, and I'm going to go into a tone and tint preset, and I'm going to be using the warm it up, but it's slightly too warm for me. So what I'm going to do is go into my split toning tab, and as you can see, the highlights have a warm tone. I'm going to turn those down a little bit. Alright, so that's all I'm going to do for this photograph. So here's the before and after. So before, you still had the detail and there is a good amount of light, but what we've done is we've brought color and light and detail back into the photograph and just kind of enhanced it. So here, all right, here's the before and the after. So we've just brightened up the photograph and really kind of made it stand out and polished it. So for this photograph, I'm not going to start with my HDR presets. I'm going to start with the all-in-one presets that come here. There are only a few, but they are good. So I am going to be using the Brighten Shadows all-in-one because I lost all this detail in here before in the shadows, so I've brightened the shadows up. Now I'm going to move into the HDR presets, and I'm going to be using the stronger HDR, which is going to add a whole lot of detail and clarity to the photograph, but it's almost too much for me, and I mentioned before about it being a little bit unrealistic looking, so what we're going to do is just adjust the clarity down a little bit. The next thing I'm going to do is use a color correct preset. I'm going to be reducing the yellows. I don't like the yellow tones that are in these buildings here. If you like them, then by all means leave them. I'm just taking them out because I think they're too yellow. So now we're going to be going into the brushes. Again, using the same subtle HDR clarity brush. This one is probably one of the best brushes in the workflow. I'm just using that on the structures here to bring more detail. I'm going to hit new, and I'm going to be using the Lift Shadows brush again. And I'm going to be using that all along the buildings here, just to kind of bring a little bit more light down into this little square here. All right, so here's the before and after. So we were able to kind of bring light and color back into the photograph, and we were able to kind of lift these shadows here so that we can get all this great detail that's in the architecture here. So I'm going to go ahead and here's the before and the after. So as you guys can see, this workflow is great for your architecture photography, especially if you're looking for that detail and color back in the photograph. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial on the Out of Shadows HDR workflow, and you'll be able to use it for yourselves.